Subscriber temporarily unavailable. Leave a message after the tone. Every day is like a raging sea. He stood in front of the classroom door for a long time. Quiet, class, he said, stepping into the huge room. Drawing the graph on the blackboard, the teacher thought that as soon as he turned his back, the waves splashing nearby would swallow him up completely. He felt very disconnected from the world of everything, but there was nothing he could do about it, except to accept the whole situation, for he felt completely powerless. Looking at the girl in the beautiful wedding dress, he thought that his love had come to an end. The thought of the whole situation at the sight of Nuna walking down the aisle to Hiya's altar, holding her father's hand, seemed absurd to him. His mom and his disgusted sister Kwan Yu-jun start applauding, and the hand that was holding his father is now holding his brother-in-law, a stranger whose name he doesn't even know. He watched her for a long time. Married at 26, what's there to be happy about? Ugh, stop clapping, it's too loud, he thought, standing next to the main entrance door of the hall. At some point, he got a headache from the noise and leaned over and covered his face with his hand. He was really pissed off about the whole thing. Suddenly, around this noise, he heard soft sobs. He slowly raised his head and looked in the direction from which the sounds were coming. Opposite, at a distance of 3 steps, stood a man in a gray suit and cried like a small abandoned child, covering his face with 2 palms. Why is that guy crying at the wedding? The man looked pathetic, but looking at him, the guy was very much surprised. Wow, it really is you, and I doubted it, he said as he approached a man in a gray suit on the street. Hello, remember me? I'm Yu-ri, Kwan Yu-ri. The man looked at the tall guy and didn't understand what was wanted of him. You don't remember? Yu-ri asked, and smelled the man stinking of alcohol a kilometer away. Doesn't he have everyone at home? How could you drop in drunk at a wedding? Puzzled, this one. You're totally wasted. Do you remember me, teacher? Teacher, teach. The teacher at this moment started crying, and Kwan Yu-ri abruptly stopped talking. As he watched the weeping teacher for a while, he thought that he wasn't the only one saddened by his sister's wedding. It was a small world, though. Kwan Yu-ri asked many questions, but the man seemed as if he didn't hear anything and continued to roar even more. This was starting to really annoy the guy. It doesn't matter. There's no point in asking if you're not listening. No one cares what happened. Getting up, he was about to leave when suddenly, the teacher fell off the bench and just passed out there as well. Kwan Yu-ri looked at the man lying on the ground with great disgust. No matter how many times he approached the teacher sitting inside in the cab, he couldn't get him to wake up. No matter how many times he asked him for his address or personal information, he didn't respond at all. What's your address? Yuri shouted at one point, losing patience. As he opened his eyes and slowly came to his senses, the teacher could barely make out the address where he lived. He was still crying. Kwan Yu-ri's patience was already low. Now there was no patience left at all. Here we are. That's my problem now, Yu-ri concluded. You don't have a digital lock. Where's the key? Eek, eek! Where's the damn key? Milk carton? Said the teacher in a half-drunken state. If you're rude, you'll definitely have to answer for it later. I should have just left it there. Would have avoided a lot of problems, he thought, as he searched for those keys. As he finally opened the door from his apartment, it occurred to him that rudeness always ends up turning against itself. Oh, the stench of alcohol is driving me crazy. Master, pull yourself together. I thought the day couldn't get any worse. Pulling a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket, he looked around and noticed the many glass bottles standing in the corner of this room. They were very conspicuous in this empty room. He asked the teacher, who was sitting passed out, if the house was definitely his and if the address was wrong. However, the teacher had no response. A blank stare. Kwan Yu-ri started to smoke as the man next to him uttered, Cigarette. Don't worry, I'll go outside. If it turns out it's not your house, it's not my fault. At that moment, the teacher abruptly grabbed the guy's neck and kissed him. The kiss was short-lived. Pulling away from the guy, the teacher just fell asleep. Kwan Yu-ri was really annoyed. This day just can't get any worse. You must be tired. Rest in your room and call me tomorrow before your flight. Thank you, Ani. I'll call you from the airport. And please tell Yu-ri thank you so much. He's been so busy lately, the girl said, smiling. She was sad that they couldn't see Yu-ri. Saying goodbye, the two of them walked further away by their hands. Are you back? An adult woman asked, holding a cell phone in her hands. She looked tired. And Hiju, is she gone? She asked again. Yes, I saw her off, the long-haired girl said to the woman. With an annoyed look, she glared at the woman in front of her while she was on the phone with Director Cho. It pissed her off. On the side of the passage, Kwan Yu-ri came running up at a fast pace. He had a worried look on his face. She noticed him running towards the direction where the lavender hall was. However, due to the cleaning of this hall, it was closed. A warning sign was placed in front of the door. It's annoying! How annoying everything is! Everything is not going according to plan. Yuri was angry as he read the signboard at the entrance of the hall. He was very angry and annoyed with what was happening. "Hey, where have you been all this time?" said the girl as she approached him. "You're part of the family. How could you just take off? Are you out of your mind?" "Hyuna left? Yes. Did you really want to see her?" The more she bombarded him with questions, the more his mood worsened. He wanted to leave rather than listen to her remarks. "You're like a child, not even capable of apologizing," she said. At the remark that he needs to grow up, Kwon Yu-ri got mad at her and just sent her away. There were a lot of people around. They began to look in their direction. "Director Cho, wait a second," said the adult woman. She shamed the two of them for their inappropriate behavior and told them to stop swearing since everyone was already looking at them. The two looked at her with great disgust, but the woman busy with her phone didn't even pay attention. In their family, it seemed to be a common thing. "Shove your shame up your ass. Since when did you care?" Kwon Yu-ri was infuriated by the whole situation going on. His mother's words had finished his already ruined, lousy mood. He was sitting across from the hotel reception desk. Next to him was a yellow suitcase. The staff were doing their work duties, and there were not many people around. "I found some lost items in the lavender room, manager. Should I just make a note in the logbook?" the maid asked. She was carrying a large white box. Kwon Yu-ri stopped her. He wanted to look at the lost items that the female employee had taken out. Nothing out of the ordinary. A scarf, a large notebook, someone's cell phone, and a brown wallet. He took the wallet and saw a teacher's ID card. Lee Seung. The teacher lived in a red building, with a small blue sign in the corner. He still couldn't recover from yesterday. He lay on the futon, exhausted, devastated, and lost in the meaning of life. The sun brightly lit the room. He sat down abruptly and couldn't remember anything. The only thing that was clear to him was that he was home. How did I get here? What time is it? The questions were many. After checking his inner jacket pockets, he wanted to take his cell phone. However, he realized that he had lost not only his cell phone, but also his purse. It couldn't get any worse. He felt bad. He clutched his head in frustration. Kwon Yu-ri was in a terrible mood. In Kakao Talk, the name of their Korean messenger Kakao Talk, his acquaintances were discussing their plans for Friday. While he was pondering, the sound of an incoming call to the cell phone, which was on the bed along with the found wallet, was heard nearby. "Hello? Hello? Sorry to disturb you at this early hour. I'm calling because I've lost my phone," a man's voice began to say on the other side. He was very uncomfortable and clearly felt out of place. Excuse me? I'd like to pick up the phone today if you're free." Yu-ri wasn't listening. He was reading a message from Hia Nuna. They would be flying out soon. For that reason, she was suggesting to meet and have lunch together. This made him very angry. "Good," he replied to the man on the other side. "Room 815. Lecture hall. Not a lot of people." Kwon Yu-ri took a seat next to the guy who immediately started pestering him with his questions or remarks. He just answered everything with his agreement. "What's going on? Johan is worried that you've been depressed lately," the young guy next to you worriedly remarked. "Huh. If that were true, he wouldn't have left me at the ceremony," he replied. "That jerk dumped him that day because he met Myung-hyung. Traitor!" The guy apologized to Yu-ri, saying that the tickets were bought in advance, and how hard it was to find free time for multiple projects and so on and so forth. Yu-ri wasn't interested in that. He didn't care no matter how much the guy sitting next to him kept apologizing. He was thinking, "Thanks for your concern, but I'm fine. I'm just a little tired," he said. Yu-ri kept complaining about being tired of this whole university life. The upperclassmen, the people, the home environment where you have to listen to all this nonsense from Nuna. Plus, his so-called friend was so crazy about his boyfriend that he forgot about him. He made a remark that Johan only has his friend on his mind, not his persona. Yuri's friend was embarrassed because he realized everything. He didn't know what to say. "What are you doing after class today? Johan and I are planning to have a drink. You should join us." "You know I don't drink. You got a soda. I'll buy it. Your favorite." The lecture hall was already full. The professor came in and began to explain something in front of the blackboard. "Don't worry about it. I'm just messing around. I have other plans for today," said Kwon Yu-ri. The teacher was greatly surprised. A tall guy in a black sweater stood in front of him. He immediately recognized him as his student. "Kwon Yu-ri, right? Don't tell me you were the one who found my stuff," he started to say. "No way, what a coincidence. Long time no see, Yu-ri." It was unexpected and embarrassing. He didn't even remember yesterday and what he was doing. How embarrassing in front of his student. Kwon Yu-ri fake smiled back. Indeed, after all, it had been so long since yesterday. "When was the last time I saw you? Has it been 2 years since you graduated?" The teacher bombarded the boy with a lot of questions. They had been sitting for a long time if you notice one empty glass bottle. Kwon Yu-ri doesn't drink. Either the teacher was embarrassed or he didn't remember anything, and that's why he was so relaxed. But he was surprisingly calm and continued to chat with his student. "How are you doing? Enjoying college?" Yeah, it's fun. The college guys are pretty nice. Now I understand why people say that college years are the best, Yuri replied, pulling on the mask of a polite and nice student as much as possible. He didn't want to sit here at all. He was rambling last night, but look how smooth he is when he's sober. I wish I could get some information out of him. There were a lot of questions. Were the two of them dating? The thought irritated him. When I saw the ID, I couldn't believe it was really you. It's a small world. I'm glad I was the one who found it. I was at a wedding yesterday and found it in the restroom. So you were among the guests? Lee Seong clearly didn't want to answer. Abruptly, his mood disappeared. Yuri did not calm down. He wanted to finish off the man who was clearly upset and sat silently with his head down in front of him. Yuri, how about a drink? I always wondered when I could have a drink with my former student. The day seemed to have arrived. The teacher wanted to distract himself and started pouring the boy a liquid from a green bottle. Kwon Yuri looked at him in bewilderment. Lee Sonu asked him in surprise if he was drinking, and realizing what he was saying, began to confusedly offer to order something else at his expense. No, it's fine. I can have a drink. Pour, Yuri said, pulling on a smile of politeness. He immediately understood the teacher's attempts to change the subject. The teacher was definitely hiding something. They clinked their shot glasses together. Kwon Yuri took a drink. The teacher, after drinking his drink, slowly lowered his hand and looked at the empty shot glass with desperate eyes. His eyes turned red. He was drunk and upset. Do you have class tomorrow? Let's just have a little drink. What do you say? The man suggested to the guy across the table. He was sitting with his head down. Yuri seemed to have reached his limit. He stood up and wanted to go to the restroom, but he couldn't control his body and collapsed back onto the couch. Lee Seonu was shocked at the sight of the boy lying on the couch. Yuri? It was midnight. The stars in the night city shone all along the street. On the nightstand was a desktop electronic clock that read 12:30. 12:31. Kwon Yuri was lying on his bed when he woke up in the middle of the night. The light from the street was shining into the small, dark room. He was in a lousy mood. When he opened the door of the room, the picture from yesterday was in front of him again. The teacher sat next to a lot of empty bottles. He was crying again. Yuri looked irritably in his direction and abruptly reached out and took the bottle from the teacher's hands. The man slowly looked at him. What the hell? I was wondering why there were so many soju bottles on the floor. Does he drink out of his throat every day? Why? You and Nuna must have been very close if you're still crying and drinking after her wedding. Sitting down next to the man, Yuri began to ask. So what's this about? Is she your ex or a secret crush? Bingo. He hit it right down the center. Lee Sonu looked at him with disdain. What? What do you mean, what? I'm talking about the wedding. Yuri started to lose his temper. He had a bad headache. He can't even drink one shot. Despite his irritation, he did not stop asking his questions. The teacher answered very quietly and in a fragmentary way, as if he didn't know what he was saying. I said, how did you two meet? In college? At the club? At the movies? Kwon Yuri stared at him with disbelief. So Hiju Nuna was a member of the movie club. She spent a lot of time there with that psycho. But it's not like she was in the habit of watching movies. Suddenly, the unpleasant thought struck him that maybe he doesn't even know this side of Hiju Nuna. Nor does he know her husband. These were just a few things that Yuri had no idea about. The vacation she was secretly planning. A kiwi farm in New Zealand. A movie club. A son-in-law whose name he can't even remember. And there were many more unknown aspects of Hiju Nuna. Yuri could no longer pretend to know her. Tell me more. What did you do in there, okay? He said, lowering his head. Lee Seonu looked sadly at the guy sitting next to him. He started to say that someone from the movie club had brought a small projector, even though the picture was blurry. But everyone used it to watch movies. That's not what I wanted to hear. What were you two doing there when you were together? Yuri raised his head and asked what he was more interested in. When it was just the two of us. A picture came before the man's eyes of the two of them sitting on the couch lighting a cigarette, looking at each other and laughing. We sometimes just smoked. Yuri showed him a small blue packet with white writing and patterns on it. Lee Seonu looked at it and started crying with his head down. Kwon Yuri thought that Hiju Nuna was indeed incredible. He took out a cigarette. Lee Seonu stared at him intently. He moved closer to the uncomprehending guy and started kissing him on the lips. It seems like there's two of us now. Two little perverts, Nuna. The man slowly fell Yuri and hovered on top of her. I'm not Kwon Hiju. Stop drinking if you can't control your actions. I bet you won't remember anything in the morning, Yuri said, getting more and more annoyed at what was happening. Congratulations. Congratulations on your wedding. The teacher looked at him and cried. I should have told you this earlier. Congratulations on your wedding, Jung Ho Hyung. It was unexpected. It was only then that Yuri remembered his newfound son-in-law's name, which he had barely heard before. Growing up, They had unspoken rules. Parental love was a luxury for him and his sister. So one of the rules was to stay out of each other's business. Nuna, do you smoke? A little boy walked into a room where a girl was standing in front of him and smoking. He was surprised that she was smoking. Oh, don't tell anyone, smiled embarrassedly at the girl across the room, brushing the remains of her cigarette into the ashtray. For Yuri, the exception to his odd family was Hiju Nuna, whom he noticed at the age of 15 as a teenager. The two of them stood alone and looked out over the city. He watched with interest as his sister took a drag on her cigarette and let the smoke out. Nuna, can I have one? What? No. Why, you're a smoker. But I'm already a student. Go to bed. You'll be soaked in smoke if you stay. So, it's a normal odor. She looked at him with a gentle gaze as he spoke. In the end, she still wouldn't let him try, to which the little boy pouted. It was this scent that Yuri could periodically smell from her. Nuna smokes. It doesn't suit her. What's that smell? Leaning against her, he looked at her and thought. Suddenly, he noticed the sad look she had. Her eyes were reddened. Nuna, really there were no options for you to get into the dorm? He said sadly, lowering his head. He could see how hard it was for her. The girl looked at him in surprise and pressed her lips together. Yuri thought that he shouldn't have said anything even though these thoughts were constantly running around in his head. Rays of sunlight were sneaking in from the window and shining directly in his face. He woke up and opened his eyes. His head ached terribly. He stood up abruptly and went to the closed room. The teacher was not there. But there was a note left by him in the kitchen. You're at my house. Since I had a little too much to drink last night and fell asleep, I didn't wake you up. I bought it before work. Eat before you go. Teacher Lee Sianu. Yuri was angry. He felt like the teacher was provoking him. Johan was very much surprised when he opened the door and saw his friend. What are you doing here? Why are you here? What about class? Mugyun Hyung is studying? Hey, did I ask you a question? I need to get some sleep. Yuri didn't pay attention to the shouts from behind him. He just wanted to get some sleep, which he did. He lay down on the sofa and fell asleep. Are you really okay? Hey, Kwan Yuri, hey. There was no answer. Johan looked worriedly at the boy and understood nothing. Oh, come on, you big-eared stump. He threw the big blanket over the guy and scratched his head, then walked out of the room. It's not clear how much time has passed. Yuri lay there thinking about yesterday. He couldn't get it out of his head. 1,000 questions came into his mind. A picture of his teacher kissing him passionately appeared in front of his eyes. If the teacher kissed him not because of Hijanuna but her husband, does that mean he is gay? They must have been very close if he showed up to the wedding drunk and started sobbing. What about his sister's husband? Is he gay too? That sucks. Yuri couldn't think clearly because of everything that had happened. He blamed everything on his teacher. The picture of the teacher hovering over him, crying very bitterly and congratulating him on his wedding couldn't get out of his head. Yuri was very bitter about everything. He was thinking about Hiju Nuna. School, teacher's room #2. Lee Seonu sat in the office and looked sadly at the photo that showed 2 smiling guys. Jung Ho Hyung. Teacher Lee, you're not going to the meeting? Coming. He closed the album. Let me tell you something you already know. While we recommend not pushing yourself with studying, stress can be a powerful motivator. There were many people at the meeting. Everyone was listening to the man in the red vest, who was talking a lot about psychological points in dealing with students and so on. Lee Seonu didn't hear anything at all. He was detached from the entire world and was only looking at the paper in front of him. It seemed like he was the only unhappy person in this office. Teacher Lee Seonu, are you listening? Yes. Please focus. Year 1 and Year 2 high school teachers need to step up as there are many popular prep courses in our area. The meeting seemed to go on for ages. The principal talked about the importance of the reputation of a public school compared to private schools. He brought up the issue of teachers keeping a special eye on the self-teaching classes that needed leaders. Everyone sitting there started whispering around each other. The next issue is the new library. This was discussed last time. When the construction is finished, we will hire a professional librarian. Before the humanities lectures start during winter break, we decided to put one of the Year 20 high school teachers in charge of organizing the books. Since Teacher Lee is already in charge of organizing reading activities, I would like to ask if you will take the position, said the principal. All eyes were directed at him. It seems that the policy of using pressure does not only apply to students. Lee Sonu watched his co-workers' discussions as they reacted negatively to the director's words in the meeting. Teacher Lee, a woman with blonde hair, approached him. Teacher Choi, is there something you want to tell me? I think you'd better find out. He had no idea what it was about. Teacher Choi was embarrassed, and holding her left hand to her cheek, she said worriedly that she had heard in the other teacher's room this morning that Jihan had come in for counseling about dropping out. The world crumbled beneath our feet. Yuri woke up to popping noises in the apartment. He glanced irritably toward the door of his friend's room.
Give me a break.
There were two boys lying on the bed. One of them resentfully tried to break free from the tight embrace. Don't even think about it, it won't work. It's too much. Yuri will wake up if you keep making noise, Mogyun said, embarrassed. His cheeks were flushed red with shame. I'm just kissing you. No noise. Or do you want it louder? Johan started kissing the neck of the guy lying in front of him, in this way teasing him even more. The atmosphere became more intimate. Kwan Yuri was standing outside the door of their room and heard everything. He turned around and left. As he walked down the stairs, a familiar guy with red hair happened to come up to meet him. The guy looked at him with surprise and asked, Yuri Hyungnim, hello, where are you going? To teach you, replied Yuri, descending further. The red-haired guy followed him. He started to talk about the agreed-upon activity as Yuri stopped him and told him to follow him. They sat in front of the panoramic window and drank cold lemonade. The youngest was happily eating the cake in front of him. He was talking a lot. Hyungnim, can I order another piece? I'll say I'm late for extra classes. You look good in those clothes. You have a little sister, right? Do you think I'm cute? Yuri wasn't listening at all. He had other things on his mind. For the next 2 days, he was overcome with irritation and anxiety. The stifling collective life that had to be endured by the elders that constantly demand respect even though they don't really deserve it. Park Moo-kyung that exhausts himself by working with textbooks, and also, his family. It's due on Friday and I haven't written a line. The black-haired girl was saying to the person on the other side of the screen. She was sitting cross-legged in a big white sofa and said indignantly that she couldn't copy. If I mix it all together, it's going to be terrible. No. The principal studied with Professor Chan, she said unhappily. Yuri was making himself coffee with a frowny face and was an unwilling witness to everything. He felt like he was going crazy. Everything pissed him off. Does she even know what kind of person the brother-in-law is? He resented, glancing at her silhouette from behind. He thought she would have noticed something, since they were on close terms. Hold on a second, I'm getting a call. I'll call you back later. It's not the professor, the girl said. It's my sister calling. At this moment, Yuri came to his senses. Hello? Ju? Yes. How was the trip? Are there a lot of Koreans there? His sister replied with a smile. Nope, no need to stop at duty-free. I have nothing new. She looked around and noticed a guy standing in front of her with a desperate look. He held out his hand to her, asking her to give him her phone. She snorted unhappily and continued talking. No, nothing. I'll call you later. She said goodbye. Yuri was angry. Are you kidding me? I wanted to talk to her. Am I kidding? So she'd give you the phone number. Then what? What would you say to her? Ju finally found some time to relax. Do me a favor. Stop bothering her for nothing. She got up from the couch and walked past him, picking up her laptop. He was disappointed. Would you say the same thing if you knew what that nothing was? Only by asking the person directly involved in the situation can one judge whether it's all nothing or not. High school. High schoolers spend their carefree time in between classes. A bunch of high school girls were standing around discussing about last week's meeting at the fan site, an autograph session where fans can meet their idols. While excitedly discussing about meeting her idol, she didn't notice a tall guy appear in front of her. He was smiling and looking at me. Man, so handsome, said the girl when she bumped into him by accident. Sorry. It's all right, I was going to ask, Kwan Yuri replied, while the girl embarrassingly bowed in her apology. The high school girlfriends in the back blushed when such a handsome guy spoke to them. They looked at him expectantly, either embarrassed or interested. Kwan Yuri, watching their reactions with indifference, asked, Do you know where teacher Lee Seong-woo is? Lee Seong-woo was in the library, in the corner of the huge shelves filled with various books. He was thoughtfully going through book after book. He thought about Ji-hoon, who had come to talk about leaving the school. A picture of Ji-hong standing in front of him and weeping bitterly as he stood stunned, shocked at what was happening, appeared before his eyes. I can't tell anyone about this. They'll pretend to understand, but in reality, they'll just ignore me. Lee Seong-woo remembered his words and how desperate he was to talk about his problem. His disciple thought that no one would support him. Lee Seong-woo was very concerned about Ji-hoon's condition, and he called his student many times. However, he did not pick up his cell phone. No matter how many times he called, the voice on the other end kept saying, The caller is currently unable to answer your call. Please leave a message after the beep. Yuri walked confidently down the long, empty, and old familiar hallway of his school, heading towards the library. Window shadows loomed on the floor. The time was nearing evening. He was looking for a teacher. As he passed through the glass doors of the library, he noticed a silhouette standing between the huge shelving units. Yuri noticed that the teacher's appearance was haggard and tired as he turned around in his direction. Yuri was amused by the surprised face of the man in front of him, and he smiled kindly. Yuri, what are you doing here? Teacher asked in surprise. Who was who, but he didn't expect to see him here at all. Wanted to meet. Ask the students. They said that you are probably here, Yuri replied, enjoying the situation even more. Were you assigned to keep an eye on the self-learners? What? Oh, yeah. But the library is under renovation right now, so just in charge of the books, said the teacher, pulling on a smile of politeness. But you could see by the way he was clearly not eager to see him. He nervously started wiping his phone. To books, then. Are you alone? The guy in front of him asked. There wasn't a soul in such a spacious library. The study tables meant for school children were empty. Yuri smilingly asked the teacher if he had taken a lot on his shoulders. Lee Sung-woo nervously glanced in his direction and remained silent. He didn't understand what his student was doing here and why he was looking for him. It's not... Anyway, it's good to see you. Did you get home okay then? You should have called me, but I was running around and forgot all about it, he continued to say, even more nervous about the tall guy standing very close to him. Yuri carefully watched the man who was rearranging the textbooks in front of him. The teacher was talking non-stop about that night, as if something would happen if he stopped talking now. He kept going on and on about how embarrassed he felt about leaving him, and that he shouldn't have gotten drunk and left him there alone. His desperate attempts amused Yuri, and he decided to play with the teacher even more. Well, it's all good now, right? No, it's not good. That's why I'm here, he said firmly. Teacher, leaning against the rack and leaning towards the man in front of him, he interrupted. Gu Jong-ho. You two know each other, right? Lee Seong-woo felt like a cornered beast by a predator. Jong-ho Hyung! You know him? How? He asked desperately. I should know him, don't you? After all, he is my sister's husband. The wedding where I found your things was my little sister's. Come to think of it, he smiled, covering his eyes. I think I even saw you there. Kwon Yuri watched his teacher's reaction carefully. Like a predator marking its prey, he persistently walked forward, confidently but slowly cornering him. He was enjoying this game. Judging by your reaction, that's exactly what happened. You should have come up and said hello. Were you there as a friend on the groom's side? What's your relationship with him? We're in the same club. Just friends, school friends, Lee Seong-woo replied to the persistent questions from Yuri. He tried not to show any sign and continued to stack the books with the others. The situation made him uneasy and he felt threatened. Just friends, you say? Yuri decided not to be gentle with him. Is it okay to make out with just a friend? Lee Seong-woo abruptly froze at this question, his breath caught with fear. You know, when you kissed me, you were obviously thinking of someone else. All right. Congratulations on your marriage, Jung-ho Hyun. Don't you remember? He looked with horror at the tall guy standing next to him, who was obviously pleased that he had said that. It was clear now. It was clear what his apprentice needed. This is the end. Ha, seriously, don't remember. Yuri raised his hand, pointing towards the man. No matter how drunk you were, the fact remains that you kissed me seeing another. Because of you, I couldn't sleep well for the past 2 days. Can you believe it? Yuri continued to say. He grabbed the collar of the dark shirt of the teacher, who was very frightened. When I saw you crying in the wedding hall, I thought it was out of happiness for the newlyweds. But if you call out to one of them while kissing, it changes the situation completely. So explain it to me, master. Lee Sung-woo was startled. He didn't know what to answer. The guy in front of him was mercilessly asking questions and going over what had happened that day. What the hell happened between them? I wondered, and could not find any answer, Yuri said, and sharply pressed against the cabinet. There was a loud thud of books hitting the cabinet. Lee Sung-woo was horrified as Yuri looked at him. What is your relationship with my son-in-law, teacher? The longer Lee Seong-woo remained silent, the angrier Kwon Yuri became. He was infuriated by his teacher's behavior and reactions. He kept asking questions about the relationship between them. Gradually, even more with quiet rage, he pushed the teacher without even responding to the teacher's exclamations. When Yuri pushed the teacher with force, there was a loud rumbling sound. Pressed hard against the wall, Lee Seong-woo looked up and saw a stack of books falling right on top of them. Reacting quickly, he backed up and tried to protect Yuri with his body. The teacher's hand, which was above Yuri's head after being hit by the heavy books, was very swollen and reddened from the impact. Yuri, let's talk. While Yuri froze in his teacher's arms from shock, Lee Seong-woo tried to calm him down and talk to him. These actions made Kwon Yuri very angry. Are you kidding me? He pushed the teacher away with force. Teacher Lee? A man in a pink sweater entered the library and started looking for him. "Where are you, Teacher Lee? The advertisement for an assistant librarian is almost ready. I need your opinion." The man turned in their direction and spotted them. "I can't believe my eyes. Who do we have here? Is it Yuri? What are you doing here? Did you want to see your teacher?" The man greeted him cheerfully. Kwon Yuri looked towards the person approaching them with a displeased look. "Whoa, our pride. So mature since college. You got a girlfriend yet?" "Woo, Teacher Yu, why did you come to the library?" Teacher Lee interrupted him, smiling falsely. He walked over while Yuri stayed behind him. "What? Oh, right, about the assistant. I know we discussed it at the meeting." The two of them stepped back and started talking amongst themselves. Kwon Yuri was even angrier as he watched the scene. I don't know why he was so aggressive, but the sight of the confused Teacher Lee pissed him off. "Since the library is now under your responsibility, there are two options," Teacher Yu said. "It is possible to hire a person, but last year the administration received many complaints about such an employee. Or you could hire a student from the literature department, but there was an unpleasant situation with him. He simply left his workplace without informing any of the staff. Teacher Kim is absolutely against this option. In any case, the final decision is up to you." Teacher Yu finished his long speech. Lee Seong-woo was not at all concerned, but he listened without interrupting his loud colleague, who was actively showing his participation, even though his injured arm was whimpering and aching. He quietly and calmly said that either option was fine for him. "Yes? The director was thinking of hiring a special employee after all. Shall we agree on that?" "Uh-huh. Finalize the ad. I'll approve it. It's not hard to write and publish, but to deal with a lot of resumes later," Teacher Yu was saying, when he suddenly noticed a guy still standing behind him, leaning against the wall with a bored look. "No, just a second. Yuri, do you have a job now?" "What?" Yuri didn't understand what the attention was drawn to. A man in a pink sweater approached him. "If you're not busy, how about working part-time as a library assistant?" Lee Sung-woo didn't like the idea at all. He tried to stop his colleague, but he couldn't hear anything and turned his attention back to the irritated Kwon Yu-ri. "Teacher Lee, it's much harder to bring in someone new. Think about how many applications we have to process. We'll waste a lot of time," he continued. "Wah-ah, Yuri, it's good that you came by. What do you think of the offer? All you have to do is pack the books and enter them into the computer." Lee Seong-woo held onto his injured arm, which had already turned blue, and looked at the excited Teacher Yu with a doomed look. He tried to stop him and suggest other options to solve the situation. "You're too sudden. Let's still publish the announcement and decide from there," he spoke, drawing his colleague's attention back to himself before Yu-ri could give his response. Kwon Yu-ri, watching from the sidelines at the teacher's attempts to interfere, was getting out of patience. "We still have plenty of time. There's no need to hurry. All right. If I may, I'd like to give it a try." "Permission to fill the vacancy," he interrupted, approaching the two teachers. His answer forced the teacher off balance. He looked at Yuri with incomprehension. "Really? You want some?" "Oh, Yuri, you're the best. It's nice that a graduate from our university will be working here too," Teacher Yu happily ranted, not noticing the tension between the two of them at all. He, also not noticing the panic in Lee Sung-woo's eyes, immediately offered Yu-ri to fill out a job application form. "Let's go. There's some paperwork to fill out." Kwon Yu-ri stood next to Lee Seong-woo, as he was completely unaware of everything that was going on. Lee Seong-woo was alone in the large library. He stood frustrated in the center of the scattered books, supporting his bruised arm. On the floor along with the various books was his broken cell phone. Some kind of black streak, no other way. Only unpleasant things have been happening to him lately. Lee Seong-woo sat by the bed in his bright room with blue walls. Depressed, he analyzed all the events of the past week. He of course realized inside his soul that sooner or later, the truth would come out. But he never dreamed that things would turn out this way. It's a small world. But why him? He tried to massage his bruised arm, but it was reddening and aching. He regretted getting drunk that night. Lee Seong-woo stood in front of the classroom door and pondered that since he wasn't prepared for the meeting, there was no reason to come. He didn't have to think for long. He entered the classroom. Lee Sung-woo walked into the classroom. When he looked inside the classroom, he saw a familiar sight. The high school students didn't even pay attention to him. Everyone was doing their own thing. Some were sleeping, some were having fun with their friends, and some were reading their textbooks. The class had started. The class was full. Half of the students were asleep. Only a small fraction of them were interested in the lesson. Lee Seong-woo was writing on the chalkboard with a bandaged hand. He heard someone laughing from behind him. Finally, the bell rang. The corridor was filled with students going about their business. Lee Xiongwu stepped out into the hallway as the students knocked him down and didn't even notice the teacher being pushed. That's not to say he was inconspicuous. The red cardigan contributes to that. So whatever thoughts haunted them, the rowdy kids ran on as if nothing had happened. Unfortunately, they pushed the very shoulder that was previously injured by the falling books, or more specifically, the textbooks that fell on it upon impact from Quan Yuri's hands. However, even if one considered that nothing terrible happened to him, others might have been hurt. "Don't run in the corridors. It's dangerous," said Lee Xiongwu to the three guys who turned around in his direction. They looked at him and said with all serenity, "Did we run? What did he expect?" He looked at them disdainfully and turned away as the boys continued laughing. There were a lot of people in Teacher's Lounge, too. There was only a partition set up on each table for personal space. Everyone was busy working. Some were actively working on the computer. Some were typing documents. Some were just standing around chatting with a colleague while notifications of incoming letters came in. Others were distracted from their work. The whole office was buzzing. Lee Sungwoo was also sitting in the Teacher's Lounge. His desk was located next to a cabinet full of materials and documents. There was order on his desk. The photo of him and Joan Ho Hyung together only caused him pain and disappointment. "There's a storm coming. My hideout is just about the only place I have for humanities classes. Exactly 3 days a week. 3 hours after the main classes are over. Seems pretty normal." He was sitting in a large but empty library. In the midst of the many books, he tried to cut with scissors, but his injured arm made him unable to do so. He remembered the day Quan Yuri had come here. "You know, when you kissed me, you pictured a clearly different person. Don't you remember?" It was a complete failure. Lee Xiongwu grabbed his head with both hands, but at the same second he felt pain in his right hand. He felt like he was starting to lose his mind. At that time, a tall guy came into the library, his face covered by the hood of his sweatshirt. He stepped inside the library and saw the teacher sitting pensively with his head down. The teacher didn't even notice his presence until he sat down next to him on the desk, pushing the chair next to him. Quan Yuri looked at him with interest. The teacher had a frightened look on his face, so he immediately turned away so that he wouldn't be able to overpower the boy's penetrating gaze. "You're early. You're here," the teacher said, moving the chair closer to him, as if offering to sit beside him or shielding himself from him. "Have a seat. We need to talk." The chair didn't help. Quan Yuri kicked the chair he had offered with force, causing the furniture to fall down with a violent rumble. "This hiding place couldn't keep me safe," thought Lee Xiongwu, looking at the blue chair that lay a little further away. "I'm sorry. There's no excuse for what I did. It's my fault, and I'm ashamed to even talk about it." "I'm sorry, Yuri. I'm really sorry," said Lee Sungwoo while the guy looked at him with an innocently surprised look. He would have been surprised by such a look if he had raised his head. But Lee Xiongwu didn't even have the courage to look him straight in the eye. This made Quan Yuri even more eager to be rude and felt superior to this man. "Master, I don't care if you're attracted to my lips or my ass. That's not what I asked, so don't avoid the conversation. What's the relationship between you and Gu Jong-ho? What happened at the ceremony? Why did you call me by his name during the kiss? That's what I'm interested in." "You," tried to answer the teacher as Yuri interrupted him. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. Did 2 gay men organize a fake wedding and use my sister as a fake bride?" Quan Yuri said with disdain. "My sister!" He hit the book over which the teacher's hand was standing so hard that the book flung to the ground. Unsurprisingly, it was Lee Xiongwu's bandaged arm that was hit so hard. The intense pain caused him to curl up into a fetal position, holding his arm to himself as if he was defending himself from a rapist. Quan Yuri only then noticed his injured arm. He stared at him in bewilderment. "Let's go already!" There was a sound from outside. 2 joyful girls were running down the hallway. Lee Xiongwu looked at them with such a desperate look, with such a pleading look, as if they could help him. However, he realized that the guy in front of him was an angry guy who was about to hit him. So he should talk to him in a safer place and explain the situation to him as soon as possible. "Come on, let's go outside, Yuri. Let's go outside and talk." He said pleadingly. They were sitting in a cozy coffee shop, above which hung a bright sign with the name Uni Coffee, coffee and dessert. There were different pictures on the wall with pictures of different desserts and drinks with their price tags. The 2 of them sat alone in the very corner of the coffee shop. No one touched the full cups of brown liquid. I don't think coffee would help. Quan Yuri looked at the man in front of him and was angry. Each time he was pissed off by the teacher's unhappy face. He turned away, cursing inwardly. "Yuri, what I did to you, I'm sorry for that. I really am. And Jung Ho Hyung, you were probably surprised. Don't worry, there's nothing tying us together," Lee Xiongwu started, lowering his head. He barely had the strength to say it all. I'll decide whether to bother me or not, arrogantly interrupted Quan Yuri. After some silence, Li Xiangwu, after gathering his thoughts, decided to finally tell everything. It was unrequited feelings. It doesn't matter. Unrequited feelings? What do you mean, unrequited feelings? Yuri insistently asked. Li Xiangwu covered his face with his hands and couldn't utter a word. He was in pain. Why don't you say anything? I'm shivering. Are you really gay? The guy asked in a sarcastic tone, but you don't have to answer. I don't care. Considering how easily you kissed a guy, you definitely have experience in this kind of relationship. I guess it didn't work out with you guys, so he decided to try it with a girl. He pretends to be pretty, but he's... Yuri. Li Sunwoo interrupted him. Again, I'm sorry. However, Jung Ho Hyun really had nothing to do with it. So if you're going to blame anyone, it should be me. Li Sunwoo really felt guilty about himself. However, he couldn't let someone insult his dear Hyung. Amazing. Wants all the stones to go to him, Kwan Yuri thought as he watched the man. All right, I'm going to tell Haeju Nuna about all this, or should I talk to Kwan Ho himself first? How annoying! They sent some crap! Johan shouted at the table where the three guys were sitting. There were 4 of them in the living room of their house. Yuri was sitting on the couch reading a textbook and looking at his phone. There were 2 other guys sitting at the table along with Johan doing a project together. What am I supposed to do about it? All the work is on me again. Jung Johan couldn't stop yelling. Yes, I used to rank 7th, 8th in my class. I suggest we cut ourselves out. Oh, Rating stammered. It's a miracle you even got into university, ha 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 ha. The red-haired guy sitting across from me seemed even more boisterous. Jung Johan, if you want to yell, go to the other room and do your homework there. And you, Yunjae, get busy and do some reading. Mugyun shut them up irritably. Kwan Yuri didn't listen to them at all. He was reading the message his sister had sent. She asked him for a meeting since she was flying in tomorrow at 11 o'clock. At 11, he said to himself and turned off his cell phone display. Meanwhile, the guy's topic of conversation had changed to school, or rather to Teacher Lee. Hey, Kim Yunjae, was there anything interesting at school? School? Oh, that's right. Hey! Mugyong Hyung tried to stop them. You know Teacher Lee, don't you? He broke his arm and now it's in a cast, the red-haired guy said cheerfully. What? How? I don't know, but my arm is rewired. Don't exaggerate. It's just a bandage, not a cast, Kwan Yu-ri calmly interjected. All 3 of them turned to look at him at once. Jung Johan looked in his direction with disbelief and asked how Kwan Yu-ri knew about this. Of course I wouldn't know on my own account, thought Yuri to himself. Meanwhile, Yunzi remembered something else and said loudly with a joyful, almost shouting voice, Rumor has it he's gay. Everyone fell abruptly silent and looked at him. What? There are assholes in the parallel group who make fun of him, you know? Lee's teachers have been despised since the beginning of the semester, Yunjae continued to say. Assholes saw him as a good punching bag. One of the changes they decided to kind of make a joke out of. Yunjae began to talk in detail about the story that happened at school. According to him, when Teacher Lee stood on the blackboard and wrote something, the students would laugh at him. But worst of all, one of the insolent boys came up behind him and pushed his body. The teacher sat up sharply on one knee and made a groaning sound. At first everyone was silent, because it was supposed to be just a silly joke. But the teacher's reaction surprised them. After that, everyone started to mock him. All in all, it was brutal. The teacher was shocked by their behavior and didn't confront them. But those idiots didn't say anything. That's where the rumors about his orientation came from. Yunjae finished his speech with those words. Seeing the surprised faces of the guys nearby, he excitedly wanted to tell another gossip from school, when suddenly he was abruptly stopped. Kim Yunjae, don't blab about it left and right, even if the rumors about his orientation are just a joke. It's just a stupid joke. Why would anyone believe it? Johan firmly interrupted his speech. The red-haired boy didn't understand why the older man was telling him off. He was the one who asked in the beginning. While the 2 of them were arguing, Kwan Yu-ri, who was also listening to the story, was furious. It made him angry that the teacher couldn't stand up for himself at all. Hey, Kim Yunjae, do you know Teacher Lee's number? Kwan Yu-ri was sitting in the coffee shop focused on the message that Teacher Lee's number was sent to him by Yunjae. A tall brunette took a seat at his table. How long have you been here? I'm going to study here for a while until Johan's class ends. It's an hour. Do you have any more classes today? Mogyong Hyung pulled his stuff out of his backpack while addressing him. Yuri looked at him irritably and suddenly decided to take selfies with his phone. Since we're both here, I thought I'd send Johan a picture, he replied to the misunderstanding brunette. Mogyong Hyung indignantly told him that he had a terrible temper. At that moment, Yuri's phone display flashed an incoming call from Haeju Nuna that he hadn't expected. Yes, hello? He answered immediately. Mogyong Hyung looked at him in surprise. After all, he had never seen this guy get so excited at a call. Who called? Nuna. Ah, that scary little sister, huh? Mogyong asked. Are you crazy? It's the other sister, and she doesn't scare me, I just hate her, Kwon Yu-ri replied irritably. Mo-gyun confusedly apologized and immediately turned the topic to the main character of the drama that's at the top of all the ratings right now. He remembered Johan saying how much his sister looked like that actress. Kwon Yu-ri began to emit a murderous aura towards him even more. The mere mention of his older sister spoiled his mood completely. Unexpectedly for him, a knock sounded on the side of the glass wall. Hee-ju-nuna was standing there. She waved happily at Kwon Yu-ri as he turned around in her direction. Simo Gyeong-hyung looked questioningly towards the red-haired girl, who was touching Kwon Yu-ri's face while smiling. They stood in front of the building. Watching her, he thought about the similarities between her and that actress. As a tall guy in a red sweater came up behind him. Out of breath from running, Johan shouted loudly to the entire coffee shop. Han! He began to ban him from spending time together with Kwon Yu-ri with loud indignation. Where did you come from anyway? Mo-gyun was puzzled. Don't even dare have lunch with him. Or better yet, transfer to another university. Meanwhile, Kwon Yu-ri along with Hee-ju-nuna were still walking down the street when it was already getting dark. I was supposed to be on the plane by 11 o'clock, but there's been a slight change of plans. Surprised? I wanted to surprise you, she said happily. Kwon Yu-ri asked how she knew where it was, to which she replied that he often went there to study, and she decided to check out the cafe first. Kwon Yu-ri looked at her fondly. He listened intently as she spoke with childlike delight. As they walked together, she suddenly stopped talking and noticed someone on the other side of the road. There was a guy in a beige coat standing in the small smoking room. It was Jung Ho-hyung. He lit a cigarette, noticed his name, and waved back at them, smiling happily. Brother-in-law, long time no see. Yuri's mood immediately soured. Did I guess that Yuri was really in that cafe? Jung Ho-hyung said cheerfully as he came out to meet them. Right, replied the girl, laughing together. It's good to see you. It's a shame we never got to meet after the wedding. But better late than never. Finished your homework? You haven't eaten yet? We wanted to have lunch together. Is that okay with you? Jung Ho-hyung said. The red-haired girl was already standing next to her husband and smilingly looked towards Kwon Yu-ri as well. Of course he's against it. Yu-ri was really pissed off by the situation. After all, he thought they would only be together, and his son-in-law's friendliness made his already lousy mood even worse. He was even more annoyed that Hee-ju-nuna was not paying attention to her husband at all. I called my sister, but she said she couldn't come over. The deadline's looming. She's totally caught up with herself. Really? So much work, he said, holding her hand. Different genre this time. Kwon Yu-ri frustratedly watched the two of them talk softly to each other. It felt like they didn't notice anyone but themselves. He didn't want to be the third person here. He was starting to get annoyed by this. Suddenly, he looked in the other direction in surprise and said with a smile, I'm sorry. It was very bright in the teacher's lounge. Lee Sung-woo sat at the computer and worked on projects. In the background, the conversation of his coworkers could be heard discussing the usual worldly matters. I was wondering, do you mind if I invite someone I know to eat with us? I'm off. Thank you all for a job well done. There weren't many staff members in the teacher's lounge. However, they were all two-faced hypocrites. They smiled to your face, but when you moved a little farther away, their friendly masks fell off. What? We work together, of course, but while some of us plow like horses, some of us chill all day long and are even the first to leave. And similar statements right after you, as was just directed after his colleague. He was distracted from his deep thoughts by an unexpected notification on his cell phone. It was an incoming message from someone he didn't want to hear, let alone see at all. We need to talk. I'll be waiting outside the movie theater at H. Kwon Yu-ri Station. The atmosphere of the city at night had its own charm. Bright lights were shining everywhere. People were coming home after a day's work, and there were lots of cars. A neon sign with purple lettering reading Negabox on the building brightly illuminated the street. Lee Sung-woo stood in front of the guy who was looking at him with a wide smile. He didn't know why Kwon Yu-ri had called out to him. When he asked, he just hugged him cheerfully and told him to follow him. He simply ignored the rest of his questions. Lee Sung-woo seemed to be in a good mood with Yu-ri. Don't ask unnecessary questions. You'll understand soon enough, said Kwon Yu-ri. The two of them stood in front of Jung Ho-hyung and Hee-ju-nuna. It was very clear from the astonished faces of the couple who were sitting holding hands that they hadn't expected such a twist at all. Lee Seon-woo was horrified. Yuri! So you wanted to call Sona? Jung Ho-hyung stood up from his seat with sudden joy. Kwon Yu-ri made a surprised face and said, Do you two know each other? We know each other. We've been close since college. How do you know each other? How did you meet? Oh, when I was in the second grade of high school, Mr. Lee Sonu was my class teacher. Of the teachers, I trust him the most. Really, how wonderful. Coincidence or true fate? No, I'm sure it's a fateful meeting. Well, sit down both of you. Jung Ho-hyung replied cheerfully. Lee Seong-woo looked at the young man with great bewilderment. However, He didn't notice it at all and was very enthusiastic about what was to follow. He knew there were always guys trying to test his patience to the limit. Every day. Every day there were a couple of people. Now it was his former student who decided to do it. Lee Sung-woo feels like he's standing on the edge of a cliff, but he hasn't made a decisive move yet. Anyone touches it and the body goes down. You know, at first I thought you didn't show up for the ceremony. I couldn't find you. Calls went unanswered. The only way I knew you were there was by name on the attendance list. And you've been ignoring me lately. Have you been working too hard? Jung Ho-hyung said, hugging his wife with one arm. Lee Seong-woo smiled faintly and began to justify himself to him. I'm sorry. There was an incident at school that day. I was so busy that I forgot to even say hello, he replied to the man across from him. Yuri listened attentively and occasionally snickered at his teacher's lies. But he also interjected into the conversation between them, drawing attention to his own person. You must have been busy for greetings, pumping yourself full of alcohol, he said quietly to his teacher, which made the latter pretend not to hear. By the way, you met at a club. What club? The girl asked. Musical? Sports? At the movie club. I was having a hard time at the time, so I joined to distract myself, Chun Ho-hyung said with a happy laugh. He was happy to remember those student days. He turned to his friend, asking about mutual acquaintances from the movie club. The man started talking about the guy who ran the club, who was so obsessed with art movies that he collected them from all over the country. It was the first movie they watched together with Lee Sung-woo. It was a Swedish movie about a jazz bar, wasn't it? He turned to Sung-woo. I can't remember the name. What about Swedish proverb, right? Lee Sung-woo was bitter about all the happy times they had together. He was getting more and more upset while Kwon Yuri was watching him and enjoying it. Whoa, sounds like you two have a special relationship. Are you that close? He said with a smug grin. He started asking double-bottomed questions, but no one but Lee Seon-woo sensed the catch. Jung Ho-hyung only smiled naively, confirming his words. What else did you do at the club? Kwon Yuri was clearly enjoying watching the teacher's reaction. It was clearly not just watching movies. Kwon Yuri closely watched every reaction of the people present. He asked with great eagerness about the movie club they were in. And while asking questions, he looked in Teacher Lee's direction. The teacher noticed all this. He understood what he was trying to accomplish. Like that? We mostly watched movies, studied for exams. Oh, we also played board games sometimes. Jung Ho-hyung started to reminisce about those times. Hee-ju Nuna got interested and started asking about the movie club. Sounds like fun. I don't even know why I didn't join the club. To do it now, she said cheerfully. The two of them looked very harmonious together. They did seem very much in love from the outside. Lee Sung-woo was upset when he looked at the man who was being so affectionate to his wife. Unable to look at him anymore, he turned away. As he noticed that the Kwon Yuri sitting next to him clenched his hands into a fist, he realized everything was falling into place. He wasn't the only one with a broken heart. He wasn't the only one suffering from unrequited love. After all, how else could one explain the look of pain and hopelessness he saw in his student's eyes? It was unexpected. That's right, Yuri. Look, Hee-ju Nuna stretched out her hand towards the guy, showing an image on her phone's screen. This daughter of a Kiwi farmer I worked for while traveling on a work visa. Just the other day we were able to meet again in the Maldives. She could barely walk then, but now she is so big. She talks and runs everywhere. On the screen was a picture of Jun Ho-hyung and Hee-ju Nuna hugging a little girl with a yellow dress. They looked like a young, happy family. It was great to meet you. It's a small world, isn't it? She continued, not noticing the change in the guy's expression. I've been dealing with kids lately. Maybe it's time we started thinking about our own. The couple kept talking about the future and planning their children. They were completely oblivious to the others, completely absorbed in each other. Jung Ho-hyung said happily how he wished he had a daughter so he could walk with her every day holding hands. To walk together with her on weekends. He excitedly said that now he should buy a cabin and camping equipment. At these remarks, Hee-ju Nuna was so embarrassed that she remembered Kwon Yuri, who was also listening to them. Brother-in-law, from now on I'm in charge of your Nuna's happiness, so don't worry, okay? Smiling broadly, Jung Ho-hyung turned to the boy. Kwon Yuri ran out of patience, speaking so loudly as if it wasn't a matter of course. He said, with obvious disdain, but here's the question. Is a man who so abruptly married a coworker capable of being serious enough to be responsible for someone else's happiness? Everyone looked at him. Everyone had a tense reaction. Lee Sung-woo looked at the guy who was looking at the interlocutors with an indifferent face. He thought it must take exceptional bravery and courage to utter such a thing. Evening. There were few cars on the road. Lee Sung-woo saw off the couple who drove away in a white car. He looked back toward the park where his student sat on a bench illuminated by bright lanterns. Kwon Yuri decided to have a smoke. abruptly snatched the only lit cigarette from his hands. Smoking was forbidden in the park. A man in a beige suit stood in front of him. He broke his cigarette, causing Kwon Yu-ri to cast a displeased look in his direction. "Are you playing teacher?" he said, as the cigarette was tossed into the box labeled garbage. "I noticed this afternoon that Koo Jung-ho has the same cigarettes. I wondered why you were only scolding me for smoking. Are you on a roll?" He made fun of Teacher Lee. "You always lied to me about not smoking. If I penalized you for every cigarette you smoked, you'd lose about 20 points. It was about the 100-point system for grading student performance. Did you call me here on purpose today?" he asked the guy sitting there. Kwon Yuri looked at him angrily. He decided to check it out. He wondered if the whole thing was a gay phenomenon. And what? If Teacher Lee was really in love with his son-in-law unrequitedly, or if both of them were involved after all. "Okay, I get it. I hope you feel better now that you've insulted me enough," Lee Sun-woo said glumly. Kwon Yu-ri had a sad expression on his face. Lee Sung-woo looked at the guy who was sitting in front of him with such a long-suffering face and understood him completely. It felt like he understood the pain the guy was feeling. But he couldn't be too angry with him. "Hee-ju said she was planning to go to your family's house. Are you going too?" he asked. "None of your business." Yuri was clearly not going to be polite. He sat frustrated with his head down. He didn't feel like talking. "I guess see you later then," said the man and left. It wasn't clear how much time had passed. It was dark. A man in a beige suit was walking down the green alley. Lee Sung-woo couldn't get that look on Kwon Yu-ri's face out of his mind. He stopped and looked back. Kwon Yu-ri was still sitting with his head down. There wasn't a single soul nearby. He felt someone coming toward him and lifting his head upward. Saw Teacher Lee standing in front of him. He turned back. If you don't feel like going home tonight, how about coming to my place for a drink?" They sat in a room alone and drank alcohol. Lee Sung-woo was going to get really drunk to forget himself. Kwon Yu-ri looked at the man who was drinking nonstop and turned his back on him, cursing internally. He was trying to drink too, but he really wasn't very good at it, which made him cough. "What are you looking at?" he said, turning to the teacher who was staring at him. I was just thinking about how human relationships can be weird," the teacher replied, causing Yu-ri to look at him angrily. "I just don't understand," squeezing the can, making it crumple. "You and Hee-ju Nuna. What do you see in a man who only knows how to laugh all the time? What's so good about him? What's so good about him that you get so drunk every day? What, that Swedish jazz movie you both saw, right?" He looked at him and asked why Teacher Lee was so steamed about him. Lee Sung-woo looked at him tiredly. He was clearly bored with the topic, but he replied that it was an Italian movie. He started to say that the movie wasn't about jazz bars, it was about a winery, and those Swedish proverbs that Jung Ho-hyung had mentioned, he'd never heard in his life. He remembered the moment where they were sitting on the couch in the classroom in front of the big screen, watching a movie, as he noticed tears dripping down the face of the guy sitting next to him, who turned away from him in the other direction. "What am I going to do?" he thought then beside him. He doesn't remember anything. Lee Sung-woo started crying as memories came flooding back to him. Kwon Yu-ri became very angry at this situation. Snatching the cigarette, he thought that Teacher Lee couldn't even answer his question humanly. When the guy got up to go outside and smoke, the teacher sitting behind him told him he was allowed to smoke in here as well. "Why?" Kwon Yu-ri asked him. "So that as soon as I started smoking, you would kiss me again?" "Not at all," replied the teacher. The boy looked in his direction unhappily. Teacher Lee inhaled the smoke from the cigarette. For as he said himself, Yu-ri smoked right in front of him and stared at him intently. "Tell me the truth. When you got drunk and kissed me, did you imagine Koo Jung-ho in my place?" Lee Seong-woo was annoyed by such questions. However, Kwon Yu-ri became even more rude when he was silent. Kwon Yu-ri grabbed his chin and pulled him to him. "Something like that, right?" he said, and kissed the man in front of him with a hickey, which shocked the other man. "If something like that happened to Koo Chun-ho, you would want to do it, right?" Kwon Yu-ri said, looking at the teacher defiantly, like the last pervert. Teacher Lee raised his hand holding the green glass bottle as if protecting himself from him. While the guy was putting out his cigarettes against the glass bottle, Lee Sung-woo was thinking that he wished he had never gone to this wedding. Indecent noises were heard in the hallway of their apartment. Teacher Lee with all his might tried to stop the guy who was persistently trying to kiss him. Even when he turned his face away at Kwon Yuri's attempts at a kiss, he was even angrier. "What is it? Didn't you like doing things like this? After you did everything you liked to do, why are you doing this to me?" The guy was really good at manipulating him. "Kwon Yuri, did you imagine him while you were kissing me?" Yuri got into the taste and persistently started asking vulgar questions. He wanted to get an even sharper reaction from Teacher Lee. He succeeded.